So welcome to my channel, That's What We Call the Good Life. Today I'm going to be talking about all the things you must sow in April, and indeed the things that I'm going to be sowing myself in April. I'm also going to be giving you some top tips on how I sow mine and some little things to look out for along the way. Now if you've not already subscribed to my channel, if you could please do so, because you'll get lots of helpful hints and tips all throughout the year from my allotment, my home garden, and from time to time my home kitchen. Now today I'm in my home garden and I've got some of my seeds out on the table that I'm going to be planting, and I probably pretty much will get most of these in April. Some of them might spin over into May, but my intention is to get all of these out in April, and I pretty much do a similar thing every single year. Now it's a really exciting time because there's really some different things you can start to sow now, which I get really excited. I don't know about anyone else, so I enjoy sharing with other people what I'm sowing, and indeed the variety of things you can sow. Now one thing that's really important, and if you've not got one already, although you don't have to have one, I've got my trusty heated propagator, which makes germination so much more reliable and so much quicker, which means you can start so many more things off using that. Now we will put a link in the description and up on the screen if you'd like to purchase one. We have an Amazon shop, and I do have to tell you we do make a little bit of money out of it if you were to make a purchase, but obviously you can buy one somewhere else. But if you want to do it in an easy way, just click on the link and you can order one for yourself. Now let's move on to all the exciting things I'm going to be sowing. Now one of the things that gives me immense joy is the variety of things you can sow of certain varieties. Now one of the things I absolutely adore are all things in the squashes, the courgettes, the pumpkins, the cucumbers, those sorts of things. Now I'm going to show you some of the things that I'm going to be sowing, all the different varieties, and some little tips on how I do it. So the squashes I've got are Harvest Moon, which is more like a traditional, unfortunately it hasn't got a picture on it, more like a traditional orange pumpkin, that one. We've got, I can't pronounce that very well, Red Hokkaido. If anyone knows how to pronounce that properly, you can correct me. That's a small red squash. I've got a very unusual pumpkin there, which is Muscade de Provence, which is a very deep, dense kind of squash. Again, a very different texture to the type of a normal traditional squash that you see in the supermarket. And that's the great thing about growing stuff yourself. You can grow a wide variety of colours. The textures are slightly different, the flavours are slightly different. So the other varieties I'm going to be growing will be traditional butternut. I've got sweet dumpling, which is one of my favourites, spaghetti squash, which is exactly what it says. You can see the texture of the squash. Once you cook it, it's actually a little bit like spaghetti, so very interesting. Turk's turban, a very colourful squash, and also table queen. And I've got more, believe it or not. I am slightly obsessed with growing squashes. Mashed potato squash, I've grown that for the last few years, and that is actually quite a tasty kind of squash as well. Exactly what it says, it's got the texture of a potato, but it's still quite a lot like a squash as well. And then I've got sunshine, which you can see that's a lovely, almost red, very deep orange, and also crown prince, which is kind of like a grey, greeny, silvery colour, which is a really lovely one as well. Lovely texture of the flesh there. So I'm going to be sowing those in April. I've also got a selection of courgettes. Again, the same things with courgettes, there's so many different varieties, and a lot of people grow courgettes and they get really bored of them, but if you grow a variety, it makes it so much more interesting. And again, the colours, the flavours, the textures are all slightly different, and they just make it a little bit more fun and a little bit more colour on your plate. So the varieties I've got are Black Beauty, which is a very deep green, Golden Zucchini, which as you can see is a yellow long courgette, Lebanese, a light green long courgette, yellow scallop, which is kind of almost like the little flying saucer ones, which is quite lovely. You can eat those quite small and bake them whole. They're absolutely delicious. And the patty pan green as well, similar kind of thing. You can let them get a little bit bigger, or you can cook them when they're tiny. Absolutely beautiful. And the little round ones as well there, called Denise a fruit, which my pronunciation is probably very bad. I've also got Ambassador, which is a traditional dark green variety, and something called Custard White, which is another one of those kind of like flying saucer ones, which is another interesting one to grow. And cucumbers, there's so many different varieties of cucumbers. I must admit, that's one where I just usually grow 1 or 2 varieties. That's one of my favourites, Nimrod. The reason I like Nimrod is because it grows very, very prolifically. They're little tiny cucumbers, and you don't have to worry about pollinating them. They pollinate themselves. You know, some of them you have to faff around with flowers and all that sort of thing, and they can be a bit bitter, some of them, if you don't get it right, whereas these ones, they pollinate themselves, so it makes life a heck of a lot easier. Those ones do. Now, how you plant these, it's ever so simple. I do them in pots like this. So all these different varieties, all in that pile there, all the squashes, the courgettes, the pumpkins and the cucumbers. I sow them into a pot. I normally put 1 in each corner. You put them down the depth of the seed, so however big the seed is, you put them down that deep as a general rule of thumb. That's generally how you sow most seeds, to be fair. I've heard some people have been nicking the tops of the seeds because it helps with germination. I've never done that before, but if you've done that, I'd love to hear whether you've had success from that. There's also been much debate as to how you put them in. Does it matter if you lay them flat or on the side? I generally lay them with the seed facing up, so it's not lying flat down, just to help it germinate a bit better. But again, if anyone's had different successes with that, I'd love to know. So that's how I plant those, and then as they get a little bit bigger, I will then pop them on. Generally, most do germinate, so as they get a little bit bigger, I'll then plant them onto their single pots before I put them outside. Now, these obviously must be kept in a frost-free environment, so obviously I start them off in here first. They'll go into my conservatory, and then they go into the greenhouse, and then when I'm confident to put them out, I will put them out. But that will probably be towards the end of April, more likely into May, if I'm really honest. So it all depends where you live with regards to the weather. The great things with these is you get a bountiful amounts of crop with them. They're very easy and reliable, and they just grow so ferociously. So do leave yourself plenty of space when you plant them. You do need a whole square metre per plant, because each of these things, with the exception of the cucumbers, which I will trial up, all squashes and pumpkins and courgettes, they take up a very large space. One of the mistakes a lot of people make is they start trimming lots of bits off. I just let mine grow and just expand. I take some leaves off towards the end of the season, but that's for different reasons, and if you watch my channel I can tell you why I do that. It's to do with mould and mildew, but initially I just let them splay out and do what they want to do, and I've always found they grow a lot better for that. So the other thing I'm going to be planting is I'm going to be planting some French beans and some mange too. Again, similar with the squashes, you can get multicoloured ones. So I've got some purple mange twos, and I've just got some normal French beans there. Got a little bit of wind here. So I normally soak these overnight in water, and then I put them between some tissue in my house, and when they've sprouted just a tiny bit, I then pop them in pots. Now, I normally put things like peas and climbing beans in pots like this, and I sink them down again. The size of the bean, you take it down below the depth of that. So if the bean's that big, it goes down that much below the soil. So that's a general rule of thumb. So you don't bury them right down deep. You don't have them on the surface like if you sowed tomatoes or things like that. They go down a little bit deeper, just like a squash or a courgette would. And I'll keep those in a frost-free environment as well until I can put them out. So again, they will be started off in the propagator, they'll then go into the conservatory, into the greenhouse, and then obviously when the risk of frost has passed, they will go into my garden or my allotment after that. And obviously things like that need support. These are, I always buy the climbing bean ones. You can buy the little bush ones, but I generally go for climbing because I figure that you just get a heck of a lot more than the little bushes. But again, the choice is yours. So I've gone for climbing, and obviously mange trees, they need some support as well because they will grow upwards as well. And if you let them go on the ground, sometimes the slugs and other things can nibble away at them. So other things, I've actually started off my broccoli already, but these are a really good reliable crop. And if you wanted to start off some other brassicas like cauliflower, I start them off in pots like that, little shallow pots. These I actually need to start to prick out and to move on to deeper pots now. But yeah, both kale and broccoli are 2 essentials in my house. I do love cauliflower, but I find it a little bit too temperamental. But if you want to start some cauliflower off, you can do that too. So like I say, in these lovely shallow pots, and I'll start pricking these out in the next day or two, and growing them on. And again, need to be kept in a frost-free environment as well. So as we move on, still lots of exciting things you can be starting off. Now, although some of these things you can start off in pots, the next few things I'm going to be going through, you can direct sow in the garden, and I indeed will be direct sowing these into the garden in April, because I find that I have so many things in little pots and things, it's hard to keep track of everything. And while some things kind of need to be started off in pots, some things you can just pop straight into the ground, but the choice is yours. So some rainbow chard, which is one of my favourites, very, very colourful, very, very versatile. I just do a narrow drill in the ground and just drop the seeds in and cover it with a very small amount of soil or compost, and they will germinate perfectly. Lettuce is another thing. I've got a selection of lettuce I'm going to be starting off. This is romaine ballon, which is a nice big one that forms a lovely heart. I'm trying some ones that heart. I normally do a lot of curly leaf varieties, but this year I seem to have got a collection of where I've got 3 seed packets, so I'm going to be trying some ones that form firmer hearts. And again, I'll either, again, you can start them off in little trays, or you can sow them direct into the ground. Carrots, again, I'll be sowing them straight into the ground. Same method as those, a small drill along with a, you know, with either a hoe or a trowel, and then just sprinkle the seeds sparingly in between, and then cover it with a very light amount of soil. Beetroot, that's something you can get in lots of different colours. In fact, carrots you can get in lots of different colours too. But one of the things I enjoy most is getting different coloured beetroot, and I've got a lovely golden eye there. I've got a Detroit and I've got a Bolt Hardy. So they're 3 that I've grown quite regularly, and really, really enjoyable. So very much nicer to grow your own beetroot, and much cheaper as well. So one of those things is, you know, to buy beetroot can be a little bit pricey, and often we only ever get it in jars. And so to grow your own beetroot, there's actually a lot of things. I made the most fantastic beetroot curry last year. Oh my goodness, it was absolutely fantastic. I loved it so much, I made loads and froze it in tubs in my freezer, and I've still got 1 tub of beetroot curry left. A friend of mine recommended it to me, and it was only because she was a good friend of mine. I trusted her opinion, and I'm so glad I did. But yeah, Google beetroot curry, because that's absolutely fantastic. Spring onions as well. So spring onions can be direct sown into the ground, or again you can start them off in pots. I must admit, this is one I find a little bit temperamental when I sow it direct into the ground, so I probably will start these off in some pots and then transplant it. If anyone's got any foolproof methods of starting them off direct into the ground, let me know, because I never get them to germinate very well in the ground, so I often start them off in a little pot and then I pop them in the ground later. And radish. Radish is a really simple and quick thing to grow, so you can be starting some radishes off now if you want to as well. And parsnips, so I'm going to be popping some parsnips in, and there's lots of different ways that people start these off. I do often put them between a little bit of tissue just to get a little sprout on them, and then I just pop them in the ground. But again, some people start them off in toilet rolls. Again, I find that a bit of a faff, if I'm really honest with you, so I will sometimes put them between a little bit of damp tissue until they've started to sprout, and then I'll just pop them in the ground so I can strategically place them a little bit more. Now, if you've enjoyed this video and you want to know what else you can plant, you can look up my March video, because an awful lot of things there you can sow now as well.